Good morning, everyone. Thank you, or good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. In this session, we are going to be talking about an experience that we have for the classroom that is about how we implement. It's a natural segue from the previous session that it was in this room. This is how we manage to bring together this event of managing growing ventures as a learning experience for the students to understand through practice how to get things done. So with this, I'm going to be sharing the space with Dr. Maria Corradini. And just a couple of quick housekeepings. The conversation is going to be recorded. There's a chat on the side for you to write your questions and comments. We are going to be answering your comments and questions. We will talk through this and we have a space at the end for the conversation. So with any of these, let me quickly introduce myself. I am an assistant professor at the Management and Global Business Department at Rutgers Business School. And I have worked as a consultant and in the industry, in academic and in non-profit organizations for a number of years. I am to what is being referred to as an community engagement scholar or an academic activist. My core research in entrepreneurship and socioeconomic development serves me to inform my classroom approaches and to bridge community, university, and practice in overall, and as well as to provide a space for what is called service learning methodologies. My courses are interdisciplinary in nature in as much as I go outside of the business school and I bridge to other spaces, like this is the case for Dr. Corradini. I work with people on the law school, medical, social work, and the success of the classes that I work on depends on my ability to collaborate and to create these interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary spaces. Today, we are going to be sharing one of those experiences in a course that is Managing Growing Ventures. And I would like Dr. Corradini to introduce herself so we can know more about where she's coming from and we can play with the class as we move along.
I am Maria Corradini, an associate professor at the Food Science Department and a real chair in food quality at the University of Guelph in Canada. I have worked in the food industry, in academia, and nonprofit organizations. My teaching is informed by my core research on food science and engineering. However, I strive to participate in teaching programs that require an integrative component or that are integrative in nature. For example, a capstone that I developed for the food science department that focuses on industrial manufacturing of food products while teaching management practices, procurement, and sustainability. Also, I have participated in Ideas Congress, a multidisciplinary course that gathers students from all colleges at the University of Guelph to solve an standing problem, which last year, for example, was reducing single-use plastics citywide. And also being a recurrent science advisor at Managing Growing Ventures led by Dr. Osorio at Rutgers Business School.
Thank you. So, what is this presentation all about? What do we expect to achieve? So today's presentation is about managing growing ventures. A core tenet in the business school is that all ventures, all business need to grow. You either grow or you die. So how do we find that space of balance of growth or what is sustainable spaces of operations? So in this class, we help the students to understand this balance and this space by bridging out the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profits. And we are going to walk you through how we develop this space, what is happening behind the scenes, and as well what is happening in front of the classroom. In this presentation, we're going to be addressing a general description of the class. We're going to be talking about what is service learning and how so service learning is the space for this. We're going to be discussing what is a multidisciplinary learning experience. We are going to extend the conversation to bridge voices of the industry into the learning and the learning into the industry. Then we are going to round it up, going back into how it looks like in the classroom. How does it brings together the experience in the classroom? And we're going to conclude with some space for you to have questions. So, the elephant in the room. What is managing growing ventures? How can we teach, how can we talk about growing ventures in a space of sustainability when we know that there are limited resources and we need to find a balance on. So managing means to grow as fast and as large as possible. So that is what we do in managing in management. However, when we bring it into the context of growing, this growth is a process, and it means that we need to assume the risk, we need to plan, and we need to undertake the managing of the space and the people and resources. A venture is an organization. So when we look at it all together, what we are discussing, what we are looking at is how do we manage to grow, to explain, to control the growth of a venture within boundaries of reason. So this is not growth for the sake of profit. This is acceptance of boundaries of sustainability while extending operations. So we are talking about extending operations, not grow. And for that, we need advices from different spaces. So to get into that space of advices, we are bringing a tricky conversation that sometimes can be difficult. So we are going to find this class at the intersection between practical experience, academic studies, and civic engagement. In a university setting, when students go into practical and academic, we find internships. When they go into practical and civic, we have volunteer. When we go into academic and civic, we find civic education, awareness. It's only at the perfect spot of these three spaces that we can have community engagement pedagogies. So we are creating a learning space that allows practice, theory, and engagement. And it's a pragmatic, progressive learning experience that gives the students a voice and an ability to bring into action. And all this is possible because we aim to meet the needs of the society. So we are not teaching students outside of the context of society, or we're not teaching students about the community. We're teaching students as members of the community.
So where do we start? I say we because, from the starting point, we come from the premise that society, industry, and academia, they have the same starting point, a real life problem. That real life problem can take many forms. It could be an actual specific product or line of products, for example, beverages for fortification. It could be a city-wide challenge, reduce the reliance of single-use plastics, or even a nationwide challenge such as reducing food insecurity, which normally we start assuming these problems, from a city-wide point of view. And where do we aim? Basically, to attain realistic solutions. And by realistic, I mean that they fulfill certain characteristics, such as, for example, being technically feasible. That will allow us to explain and to put forward the technical limitations regarding a particular topic, the current state of our scientific and technological achievements, and demystifying sci-fi solutions, since there are many misconceptions of what science can do. Science is often confused with magic, or technology is always confused with magic. So basically, bridging that gap when we are talking about a real life problem is something that we need to do from the start. This will help us to understand the role and how messy and complex our respective disciplines can be, and that is a game changer. Also, these resolutions should be cost effective. There are many solutions, but most of them are not economically viable. Therefore, it will serve only a few. Cost effectiveness also comes hand in hand with being widely applicable. Of course, that the price of a solution usually will determine the amount of people that it can reach and how many people can benefit from that. Also, it needs to be targeted and focused and market adequate. That basically is not something that the consumer or the recipient is going to reject. Therefore, to fulfill all this list of requirements, we need to approach these problems using a multidisciplinary team or perspectives. Otherwise, we are at risk of disregarding or undermining the reach of the solution. So basically, we are looking for discipline integration with main components to provide a full perspective. Ideally, the composition of the class will allow for this. However, in some other cases, such as, for example, managing growing ventures, which has a major composition regarding management and business students, we will have to infuse and facilitate this interactive cycle with external elements such as speakers. The idea is to create a conversation among them and a conversion of disciplines that will allow to discover the multiple skills of everyone, the strengths, and also the capabilities in order to explore other disciplines. The idea is for the students to identify personal and discipline skills and to integrate it and provide this like a framework of the conversation. So this approach is well suited to fulfill the needs of both the industry and society by providing a workforce that can make informed decisions, can recognize and strive towards sustainable choices and make smart moves. Currently, we are still operating in silos, and most of our students navigate homogeneous environments, are fed with the same type of knowledge, and are surrounded by like-minded individuals with the same interests and same focus of attention. So basically, one of the things that we are aiming for is try to break these walls between the disciplines and create, and as you know, Keith Adams says in the previous session, come together in order to find an appropriate solution. So our disciplines and consequently the reach of solutions and advances are silo and constricted by those walls that basically through this kind of exercises and these experiential learning courses, we are trying to break down and facilitate the communication between the groups and different members of society. That will allow us to go beyond just technical specifications or regulatory and financial requirements or just consuming perceptions, but they bring them all together in order to find the appropriate solution. And this is basically guided and geared in order to fulfill the needs of our society. Industry and the society at large requires a workforce that has a strong and solid roots within their discipline, but that is capable to interact with others, be receptive to others' perspective, and requirements to provide a feasible solution. If we take, for example, the production of a food item, a traditional student will focus on expertise, for example, the manufacturing stage, without taking into consideration the requirements throughout the whole supply chain. I cannot tell you how many times an excellent product at the benches crashes during distribution, or that didn't consider the previous steps during harvesting or storage that basically affect the manufacturing as a whole. Well, likewise, how many times marketing comes with a request from a completely unfeasible product is something that often happens. So the idea is to allow us to provide a whole view of the problem and facilitate solutions that can foster a product or a result that will fit and will address and fulfill all the desired attributes. In the case, for example, of a food product, it's a product that has good quality, that provides adequate nutrition, that is healthy, is affordable, and also fosters sustainability.
So Taking it from this, you may notice that what Dr. Corradini signal on the bottom part is a beautiful table where we can see perfect columns of what different classrooms look at. So they may look at quality, first column, or nutrition, or health, or in the case of business school, money, cash inflows, or sustainability. However, if you see of all the rows, only the bottom one that looks at every single aspect is the successful one. So how do we get the students to focus on this last line and not to be isolated, as Dr. Corradini indicated? Well, that's what is the goal of the class. So how does it get done? How do we transition into that space? So I'm going to describe the latest that we have, that it was a food product. That's why Dr. Corradini was one of my experts. This class rely on the advice and engagement of experts who help students to see the other side of the conversation to get a holistic view. So in this case, this semester, we work with a large beer company, and the company wanted to grow. The off the bat understanding of the students about growth was, we need to do more, we need to be bigger. The learning on the classroom, the behind the scenes preparation was, how do we set a learning goal about sustainable growth so students can move forward? For the company who was working with us, the community partner, there was a goal and a win situation as well. For them was, how do we get a better handle of what is our spec? How do we get a new voice? How do we solve a problem? And how we get a different set of views? So in each one of these panels, you will see that we have on the top a picture that illustrates the event. In red, the learning goal for the class, and in blue, the goal or win for the participant member of the community. So on the first case, it was a beer company. So as the classroom moves forward, we focus onto the planning. So for the students was, how do we set learning assessments? So once we know what the students need to learn, the question was, how do we set milestones to identify that the students are on track of learning and they are not reverting to their individual silos? This happened to be done in accordance with the company because we needed to align the classroom deliverable for learning with the company's deliverable of business consulting. Once we get that space of learning and one space of deliverables ready, we move into the actual class. So first stage and second stage were happening in preparation to the class as the class was mapped. Then we came into action. Action meant to get classroom projects, design homeworks, design rubrics for the homeworks, design classroom activities where students can sit in interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary teams, where they will rotate through the class, where experts like Dr. Corradini will come into the room and say, if you are considering growth through a new product, is this product something that is doable? Is the sustainable life cycle of the production adequate? Are you abusing or overusing water? Are you considering the nutritional and the life cycle of the product itself? Can this be done within the time frame? So you have technical experts guiding questions for the management students. Then you have management experts guiding questions for the technical students. Can you have an appropriate life cash cycle for this product? Can you think in terms of HR and operations? Then we have legal experts. Is this something that is within a legal confinement? Do you need to advocate for a legal change? Are you considering the conditions of the community? So all this became an ongoing conversation that moved from, I'm an expert in business, I'm an expert in technology, into we are an expert on sustainability. So it was a transition process that was done gradually within the students as we help them to see themselves as critical thinkers of our bigger process. We cap this as we move into the reflection stage, where we create spaces for students to have conversations and learning discussions. On these moments, the critical interesting part was that the partner from the industry was in the room. In this case, the CEO of the brewery company. This is a $50 million company working with undergraduate students about marketing campaigns and product development for next year. So we have a multi-million dollar CEO of a company working with undergraduate students in a discussion of reflection. And it became a two-way street. So it was not the CEO preaching the students how to get things done, nor the students pointing fingers to the evil industry, but a collaborative dialogue has been informed by experts on the back that allow the CEO of the company to learn how to be better and to leverage what they were doing good, and for the students to understand what was the purpose of the learning on their degree and in the classroom. As we move, so there were presentations, and that was the conversation. There were multiple conversations on that space, and then we cap the class with a demonstration. So how do we know that the students have learned enough? And how do we know that the partner in the community, in the industry, got what they wanted? So students presented the actual proposals, and there was an evaluation of the proposal. There were multiple outcomes. For example, the winning proposal from this class, the students were hired as a follow-up by the company to further develop the plan. And this was an interesting transition because the growth that it was suggested was not about doing more or bigger, but it was about leveraging culture and understanding. So the company launched new products that they were aimed to a Hispanic market, because in the classroom there was diversity, and within that diversity were Hispanic students who understood that cultural space, and they leveraged that cultural understanding to create an economic plan that was informed by advice of Dr. Corradini on how to create a product that has the flavor and consistency. So students define the cultural aspects of the product, and then they have conversations on how to get that into the production line. And then they brought it back into what is the market size, all within certain boundaries, and they move forward to get hired to further develop this. So this became a virtuous cycle because now the industry wants to work with us, and the company so became sustainable. So the whole idea was about being sustainable and moving forward. So how does it look like in practice? If you are sustainable, is there a way to bring this sustainable template of learning where students are the next leaders of industry who have this ideology and this way of doing business? How do we partner up? Who wins what? Well, there is a value proposition strategy. Students who are in the classroom win through this strategy because they are capable to build multidisciplinary integrative knowledge. They have a line in their resume. They can write down consulting services for Plan X. There is a company that can back up that learning and that experience. And they have the ability to understand how to use cutting edge knowledge. So sustainability to exist relies on the edge, top of the line knowledge. In a traditional classroom, students learn from a book, and within 5 years, the book becomes dated, and the student struggles to learn how to move forward. In this setting, students become comfortable working with experts who are top scholars in their fields, top researchers, and they learn how to ask the question to keep the conversation moving forward. So their knowledge does not become obsolete after graduation. As a faculty, there's as well a value to it. We develop opportunities for research. These projects allow you to create partners in the industry, so you have a place to launch research projects. You have projects that they have respondents to the surveys. When we look into the university, into our departments, we have value because we are engaging the community, we are fulfilling service roles. So we are providing service requirements. We are moving in a space where the university is breaking down the silo to open the space. As a partner in the industry, we want to participate in this space because we get free access to talent and knowledge. If you want to hire a top of the line scholar, a top of the line researcher, for the amount of time that a project takes, that is one semester, can be in the thousands of dollars or more. So by accepting to work on this framework, they get access to knowledge and quality information. They get access to expert solutions, because this is not about access to knowledge, but it's apply knowledge. They develop the relationship to these experts because so they can come back if they need. And they have a first peek to talent. They are working with students who are showcasing their ability to solve problems through a critical framework. So they get solutions, they get access to experts, and they get a first-hand peek to talent. As an institution, a university, there's a benefit to allow this learning space because you showcase your commitment to sustainability and to the community. You create partnerships within the industry, and you open your doors to the community. In all together, this creates a space that is learning and practice through sustainability. It provides a collaborative multidisciplinary effort where both industry and institution, students and professors gain, and the synergy of the space provides for a better outcome as we learn to balance the different spaces without having to compete to make one of the spaces gain. So with this, do you want to ask any questions? Is there anything that we can do to help you share in this conversation to bring these resources into your space?
It was already a really good point about circularity and how circularity will be an important role in this process. Actually, and as I respond in the chat, circularity is key to and central to this particular approach. Basically, we are trying to set up a roadmap to come together from different disciplines to solve a problem and to manage it to society. But also, you know, from the problem perspective itself, of course, that it fosters a circular thinking.
I see a question about lean startup. Yes, when we are talking about the managing growing ventures, or we are talking as well on issues of startups on economic development, we need to talk about minimum viable product. We talk about the Canvas model. So this creates a roadmap, a foundation where students can see the different boxes. Bringing experts into the conversation allows to fill into these boxes by bringing the knowledge and experience that goes there. So rather than to thinking, I'm going to Google the answer or I'm going to look up paper in the library, they learn to understand how the answer came into be. And experts are candid. Like the benefit of Dr. Corradini was that she was able to speak up what was like to be in a lab, what was like to develop a product. And students understood when they were looking at the Lean startup project, what it was meaning by lean. Like, does it mean that I need to make it cheap, or does it mean that I need to make it just good enough? On how does good enough looks like in the lab?
And during production as well.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to the use of resources, that became a really interesting conversation.
A common challenge as well that we have had in class, going to this back into circularity, as well as the lean and the Canvas, is, well, I know how hard it is for a business student to understand that science is not magic, and that there's a process between the moment that you conceptualize something to the point that is into the market. There is as well, Dr. Corradini has invited me to be a scholar in her classes to bring the management voice into the students in the science and technology. So they know that there is a price and there is a market. Any other comment or question that anyone has? And these are two very good questions that they go to the core or how a multidisciplinary classroom looks like or frames.
One of the things that I enjoy the most about this perspective is that usually we don't, as scientists, we usually don't interact so much with the community where we are embedded. So sometimes it's difficult to inform our own research from our perspective and without looking to what is happening in the society. So, for example, some of my research addresses the formation and new technologies in order to develop bioplastics. However, through one of these interactions in another year of managing growing ventures, we realized that handling bioplastics within municipality facilities was going to be challenging. Something that we never considered when, for example, when we are doing the research. So bringing that aspect now into our own research is quite important.
The other side of this conversation as well, and is going back to this interdisciplinary place for the students, is that the students, and precisely I was going to address this question on the chat, for the students was an aha moment. Like literally, you can plot through the learning process how students will stop for a moment and you will see like the light bulb going into their eyes when they understood that there was something else outside of their expertise. And the evidence of the growth was part of the learning metrics. Students were required to write a paper every couple of weeks and then a business plan. So papers were asked some basic, simple questions. So for example, they will be asked like, select a growth strategy and discuss the impact of this business growth strategy in the context of technology, environment, and human management. And you will repeat the same paper under a different wording for the next cycle. And you will notice after getting feedback and conversations that students started to move from we need to make money into we need to make sure that we're there in business tomorrow. So for business students is learning a different vocabulary. And this is one of the values where you can assess the learning when you start to see that students are using different concepts, words, and vocabularies in their writing as well as in their interactions. So you will see them talking about value proposition as a sustainability issue. You will see them talking about product environment impact as part of the cash flow issue. Like when you put a product on the shelf, depending upon how long is there, is going to be an economic impact, but there's going to be an environmental impact. You have students having conversations about let's use, and many of you who are in academia have seen it, let's solve the problem with a new app. But then they realize that solving a problem with an app needs to have a brick and mortar solution that goes from a lab like Dr. Corradini's lab, but then it has an environmental impact about CO2 emissions on the farming and data management on the processing of that app at large. So you can measure learning by the critical thinking of the students on the papers, by the use of terms and words as they engage different disciplines, by the value of the contribution on the classroom. So when they work in teams, each team does a 360 evaluation every week. So you can see how students assess each other knowledge contribution to the conversation, as well as coordination of efforts and management of goals. So you will notice that they start to move their gears as people from different disciplines start to be more proficient on the skills, on the basic skills of other groups.
I think that also one of the reactions that is quite interesting is that when you perform as an advisor from another discipline, you keep on receiving questions from the students throughout the semester. So that give us an idea of their interest and their willingness to see a problem from different perspectives and what we bring into this particular process. In terms of evidence of their growth, I think that in most of the classes of this style that I taught, in particularly managing growing ventures, is that the fact that the students get consistently higher by the participants. Sometimes, it's the company that you are helping, but sometimes it's other of the advisors, such as, or the community that they are trying to serve. So it's not unheard of. Actually, it's almost a norm that the students get higher almost immediately, which is very satisfying, because basically what we are trying to do is help them in order to become part of a reliable and useful workforce and get into the community and spread their knowledge and their own perspective, knowing that there is also some other things that they have to consider. And so that's very interesting.
And the other thing that it's the other side of the conversation that as well, it's when it happened to me the first time, it was like knock me with a feather. Walk into the classroom and I noticed a couple of students that although my classroom is very non-traditional, there were a couple of students in the classroom that they were behaving different than the rest. These two students were employees that they were sent to take the class. They were undergraduates working for one of the speakers, who was the speaker was the vice president of community development and engagement for a financial institution, a multi-billion-dollar bank, that he's a regular speaker in class. So walk into a class and I see two of my students who happen to be employees from that bank, that they had been sent to take the class because they needed them to develop this ability to see the big picture in a sustainable manner as a member of the community, because they were working on community and business loans. So it's not only that the students get higher and the students learn and they feel comfortable reaching out, like business students going out to food science to ask for advice, but members of the industry that they start to send employees into the classroom just because they see the benefit of what is happening to the participants.
And also when they arrive to the industry, one of the things that they realize is, and their employees realize, is that they are seeing or they are approaching a problem from different perspectives. So they are considering, for example, when they are replacing an ingredient, the price of the replacement. They are not coming with a solution that has that only addresses, for example, a substitution, but also, for example, how sustainable that ingredient is, how they can procure it locally in order to minimize and reduce emissions during transportation. So I think that providing them with this more holistic view of the problem allows them, when they go to their actual jobs, carry with them their capability, and they don't have to start from zero. It might be very daunting for them to just start, and the moment that they arrive to the industry, hit the wall of, for example, a price or that is not produced locally.
to the question, how do we select the teams? We have tried forcing students within teams. Usually it's chaotic and people don't get along well. We allow students to select teams themselves. Now, this is not as black and white as in just like pick your friends. There is a half an hour, 45-minute discussion about the value of talent. There's a discussion about the nature of the project and the need to have people capable to solve the problem. We discuss about the difference between having your best buddy sitting with you in class versus sitting with the most expert in the topic so you can ace the class. So this is something that the students kind of like get it. And then as we move forward, we keep repeating this. And the students select multiple teams through the first half of the semester. So they start to see how they interact with each other in different disciplines. And then they are brought into the next round where they pick the real team that they are going to be working. And it is because these previous interactions with multiple discipline teams that they end up self-selecting multidisciplinary teams where you will see them screaming in class like, I need a finance person or who understands this technology. So it is not something that we on the first day of classes says you are going to pick a team. Is we allow them to work in teams on different disciplines on different problems. So when they come to the second part selecting the final team, they self-select this expertise. Now, to the question about how the issue of the industry affects the team selection, that is a hard question. The way that at least I try to go behind the scenes is that I ask the students that the question is to account for all the elements. So they are given like a backbone guide plan where it says like when you offer a solution, you need to be mindful of industry context, cash flow, deliverables, market, development. So regardless of the question, the students are seeing the problem as a big problem within a company rather than a departmental problem for a division. So as Dr. Corradini mentions, if they are going to be facing a product that needs to have a substitution in one of the elements, this is not about how cheap will it be, but it's like, what is the most effective that will be culturally acceptable by the community? Like if you need to change gelatin, will you use animal-based or plant-based or something of the sort? Or if you need, so the problem is already embedded into an understand that is a multidisciplinary solution.
It's a really good question. And you know what John says is that the real question is why this is so surprising. Why is the sustainability approach such a reframing experience for many entrepreneurs? Yeah. And I agree with him. You know, this should not be so surprising. But it's something that basically, well, probably even from the perspective of the survival of an entrepreneur endeavor, also is quite evident. The amount of surviving endeavors is quite low. So obviously people are not thinking about not only sustainability from the environmental perspective, but also sustainability of their business as a whole. So I don't know what you think, Arturo.
Yeah, one of the challenges and one of the reasons why the students, it becomes like an aha moment going back to how do you know that they are learning, is that this so obvious question actually becomes obvious to them. When we think in how students or how business people solve oftentimes problems, they are trying to maximize profit, reduce cost. And this comes on a short time framework where they are looking into the next quarter profits rather than do I going to be in business in the next 100 years. So this part of this class is to help the students to realize that aha moment. And one of the tools that we use to come to this obvious is we don't ask the students what is the solution, but we ask them to explain what is the problem that they solve. So the shorthand on the class is what is the growing strategy? The question actually is how can you ensure that you have a sustainable operation over time? So growth becomes how do you balance to maintain or to adjust your market share while maintaining or sustaining an acceptable type of operation. But, and this is something that we have forgotten. Like, if we really think who we are in the US, we can go back to the 1910s when we have the classic case Ford versus Dodge, where the fiduciary responsibility for managers was to maximize profits. And it became ingrained that managers were to make money. And we came to a point that we think of business school as the managing school, when actually managing school is about managing resources. Business school is about managing a particular type of operations that coordinate these resources. How much work involved in, oh gosh, you are speaking of the elephant in the room. Joel, you are speaking of the elephant in the room. Usually it takes, I have a handful of people. I develop a portfolio of businesses and I have partners. It takes me between 1 to 2 months, 3 months altogether, the process. I talk to different businesses. I ask them what type of problems or needs they have. I ask them I discuss with them what is an acceptable deliverable in the time frame of a semester. We discuss the type of availability that they will have to students, like, will you release financial data? Will you release confidential information? Will you discuss hiring practices? Students sometimes need to sign non-disclosure agreements as part of the class, and I need to curate the problem that is brought to us by the company as a dynamic immersed case study. So that is the dynamic with the industry. On the other end, I have a pool of experts that I work into their classrooms and they work into my classrooms. So we have a back office network of experts and we advise each other. I'm going to be teaching this class and I need you to be an expert on this topic under this framework. So it talks about 3 months of back office work where you have a spike up as the semester comes up. The good news is that once you develop that relationship, that 3 months can be a recurrent cycle in your class, that it can be an expert to your class in terms of industry, or they may come up with a different problem and then you get a phone call out of the blue. Hey, will you be willing to take us for this topic into your class? So heavy load on the front, but then just like manage itself.
Yeah, another thing is that once you develop your network, it keeps on feeding itself. Um, so I think that this goes very well with the suggestion, with the next question that they are asking for suggestions for other interest, for others interested in kicking this kind of approach in their own universities, and what would be the key advice. So I think that the most important, well, first of all, this is the best class that you will ever teach. It's so much fun, you know.
Whether you come from science.
Exactly. So basically, is like an eye opener for you as well. So it's fascinating and super interesting, but also develop a network of um, of partners and people in your close network of professors and your professional life that can help you with that. That's, in my opinion, something that is key. The students get engaged very much, and basically one of the things that you have to be careful is that the amount of advice that they request from you is manageable. So providing help from other people is always key.
Two comments here. Number one is we are talking about this class in the context of managing growing ventures, but this class as well happens on the other side of the campus. It happens, I've been a guest speaker for Dr. Corradini class, where it has been an enriching and eye-opening experience for me to sit in a room where people speak a different language, almost like from another planet. So it's whether you sit in one side of the screen or the other is the same learning, and it becomes this network that Dr. Corradini is mentioning. There is another question that is challenging here from John. about how do we talk about moral. So something that we discuss in class,
Well, first of all,
we make,
when you start with the topic, there are certain rules that has to be abide. So they cannot do, or the project cannot be illegal, of course. So where anything that is breaches legality is not allowed. So if one of my students wants basically to add a non-permitted product in order to improve ingredients in order to improve a product, of course that's illegal, and of course that doesn't cut it. And the same happens with Arturo's class.
yeah, in my class, for example, there was a couple of semesters ago, and a student proposed to do a drive-through window for a bar. So just picture that for a moment. You have a bar and you do a drive-through window for alcohol like McDonald's. So we have this conversation about what is legal, what is what is ethical, and we understand that their ethical is culturally embedded. So the framework for the class is we need to act within the boundaries of legality. If the students are strongly suggesting something that might not be legal, then the question is, can you create a venture that will do an advocacy movement to promote a different perspective? And then they need to do a critical analysis, data-driven, knowledge-informed, supported with experts. So it's not about the class forbidding or banning certain activities. It's the students to learn how to navigate that space, because the other side of the conversation, there was a class project about a year, no, 3 years ago. There was a food-driven project. It was the hell of challenging. The students wanted to include, and I know that I have like 30 seconds to time out. So students wanted to include insects to enrich food with insects. Illegal, yet acceptable. So we have to have conversations with cultural groups. We have to engage Dr. Corradini, policy experts, that they talk about what makes the inclusion of insects, even though they are high protein content in food, illegal. So the group ended up talking not about enriching food with insect proteins, but about how do you create advocacy movements to change these rules that, while legal, they were not sustainable or properly defined. And I know that I have run over 2 minutes of my time. And I know Gina, that is very polite, making me a smoke signal saying, wrap it up. So we are available for conversations. You can reach us through the conference setting, and I'm going to type my email on the chat in case somebody wants to reach me out. And I don't know if if you can reach me out and I can divert conversations. Rutgers, but I will strongly suggest that you reach me out, and Dr. Corradini as well. You can reach us out through the interface for the conference. We're willing and joyful to talk about this. Maria works on this space as well at the international level. We have work projects in Latin America, Europe, Asia. So we're open to conversations. And with this, we bow to the forum, and we thank you.